first of all, welcome to our nutrition talk tonight. The theme is sort of fueling for sailing performance, and I just sort of introduce. My name's Jenny Armstrong. I'm the women's sailing manager at Yachting New Zealand, and I'm here tonight with Kelsey Patterson, who's a sports nutritionist for our sailing team and works at High Performance Sport New Zealand. So welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you.
And we also have Greta Pilkington here, who's currently campaigning in the Ilka 6 and has just recently returned from the 2024 Olympics with lots of learning. So welcome, Greta, and thank you for helping us out tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, good, you're there. Okay, so I just thought I'd kick this off with a little intro. So sailing, as we all know, is a sport that I think you can break it down simply into two main components. And one is the sort of physical effort, and the other big important part is the decision making. And both are enhanced and lead to better performances if you've got good fueling. And by fueling, I mean good eating and drinking, basically. So before, during, after racing or training. So tonight, I hope you'll learn some helpful tips to help you improve your performance on the water by taking care of your body and your mind. So for starters, let's get the ball rolling. Can everyone see the chat group? So let's drop into the chat your name, the boat you sail, and your go-to favorite thing to eat on the water. I'll
Excited
kick it
to read
off.
these.
I'll just tell you what mine is. Ilka 6. My name's Jenny. And my go-to is controversial, but it's bananas. So some people think it's bad luck for sailing, but I just think they're yummy. So let's see what we can see in the chat. What people have. We got some. What do you so while you're doing that, we'll do, if you think of any questions along the way, just pop them in the chat and then we'll either answer them at the same as we go, or we'll come to them at the end. Cool, I can see all OSM bars.
Popular.
Egg sandwiches, I'm not sure, but that sounds, if that's what works for you, Sarah, that's great.
We need to get some OSM sponsorship here.
Yeah. OSMs, they are pretty good. And good package to carry around.
Yeah, definitely. Peanut butter Sammy, Vegemite Sammy, love that. I hope the peanut butter and the Vegemite are in two different sandwiches.
Well, each to their own.
Yeah.
Sweet, there is a few trends coming through there, so it'll be interesting to see what you think of that, Kelsey. So I might just hand over to you and Greta to kick it off. And ham, cheese, and lettuce. Well, all right, cool. Thanks, guys. I'll pass you over to Kelsey, who will take over from there. Thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. So I've been the nutritionist for the New Zealand sailing team for about 2 years now. And I feel like I've spent the last 2 years actually just trying to get my head around sailing because it is such a complex sport from someone who comes from a non-sailing background. I was just telling Jenny before we started that I tried sailing a starling when I was a child and I absolutely loved it. And I went home to my mum and said I really wanted to start sailing, and she cut me down or shut me down really quickly and said no, because her father and my uncle sailed a lot and she didn't want that to become her adult life. So now I'm working in sailing, helping people who actually know how to sail with their performance, which I find really rewarding. So why is my slide not changing? Oh, there we go. So today I thought we'd just go through sort of why nutrition is actually important, because I think it's often overlooked in many cases by many people. And then I'm just going to go through the bread and butter of nutrition. If you know it, great, but it can, there's just some good reminders in there. We'll talk about some energy availability, pre-training and training, post-training nutrition, race day, and then I will touch on supplements as well. At any point, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat or get our attention in some way. Yeah, I'd rather answer the question while we're on that topic and it's relevant so we can sort of stay in the flow of things. And I do have questions for Greta that I will be asking along the way. So let's get into it. First up, I do want to ask Greta a question before I actually got onto the slide, and I'm just going to find it. So, Greta, are you able to talk about a time where your performance was affected by your nutrition, and what have you done differently since, or what were your learnings from this experience?
Okay. I think I've had a few. I think it's actually way more common than people think to get nutrition wrong, especially being sailors and being on the water for such a long period of time. It is quite a hard thing to get right, and it's a really easy thing to get wrong. One example is probably from, I think it was Ocean Bridge last year, maybe the year before. And all I ate that it was a really windy day, and all I ate was, I think it was a muesli bar and maybe some watermelon. I think, I don't know, ask Jenny, she was there. And yeah, it just really turned my day into a lot. It was a lot harder than it needed to be, and I think if I was a lot more prepared and had fueled properly, the day probably would have gone a lot better than I thought. And then probably another more recent example is when we arrived in Marseille before the Olympics, and obviously it was really hot, and so we didn't really understand the impact of especially hydration. I think that was a big thing which I just underestimated and didn't prepare enough, and so it took me a few days to overcome, I think, probably a little bit of like heat stroke and dehydration. So it's kind of a domino effect, and if you don't get onto it early enough, it does make your life a lot harder. Yeah.
Great answers. And I think that really just highlights what I'm actually trying to tell you about why nutrition is actually important. So if we look at this little diagram here, there's all of the body systems on there, and then there's all of the things about being an athlete there. So obviously we're all human first and we're athletes second. So nutrition impacts your immune function, your growth, your development, your brain health. It affects your performance, your growth, obviously growth and development, your training, decision making. I know when I'm hungry, I make some pretty questionable decisions, or I'm a very cranky person to be around. It affects our mental health. It is really hard to be happy and present and positive if you're not fueling your brain. It impacts our relationships with friends and family and ourselves. It basically just affects everything and every aspect of your life. So if you get your nutrition wrong, it can really impact you as a person. So no pressure, but it does impact a lot. Cool. All right, so what I've been told is that most of you are in sort of your teenage years, so around 12 to 18. Now, these are growth charts, and I'm not going to spend too long on them, but I just wanted to highlight that you're all in a really unique period of life where your energy demands, if we take sport out of it, your energy demands for growth and development are so high at the moment. And then when we add in your sport and your energy demands from that, and then we add in your energy demands from actually learning at school, how much energy you actually need to be having in a day is the highest of which it will be basically for your entire life. And I would say most teenagers I've met underfuel as opposed to overfuel. So if we do small tweaks in nutrition, it can help hugely with your performance, your health, your well-being, everything, basically. So this is my little sports nutrition pyramid. And at the base, we have balanced, adequate overall nutrition. So this is just getting the basics right. This is eating enough, making sure you're eating regularly. And then we have timing of meals and snacks. So this would be making sure that the timing of them around training, timing of them around everything else in your life is nailed. And then at the top, we've got supplements. Now, where I see a lot of athletes and people who are active get it wrong is that they go to supplements first because it's like a real easy fix, or so they think, and then they try and work their way down and focus on the big rocks. But in reality, if you don't get that bottom layer right, the supplements don't do anything. It's just making your life really expensive. And actually, if you're under 18, we don't recommend using supplements, which I will get to at the end of the presentation. So basically what I'm trying to say is focus on the big rocks at the start. Focus on learning about nutrition, learning about how to actually eat for your body, and the timing of meals around training, and then supplements last, which that's sort of like the sprinkles on top of the cupcake. Somebody has the mic not muted. Can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go through the food groups really quickly. I think it's really important to make sure you've got the basics covered. So we've got meat and meat alternatives to start with. Now, most people will know these as the protein group because they are a really great source of protein, fat, energy, vitamins, minerals, especially iron. Iron's really important for obviously breathing, oxygen, energy. And if you are a female, your iron requirements are a bit higher because we have our monthly periods. You do require to have about 2 to 3 serves a day of meat or meat alternatives. Obviously, if you're plant-based, the meat alternatives, or if you like to have both, you can have both. Protein is really essential for growth, recovery, development, and actually just trying to feel full. I'm not sure if you've ever had a meal like pumpkin soup where it's just pumpkin and you feel really hungry about half an hour later. It's because there's just one food group in there. If we try and get protein into most of the main meals and snacks, you'll find that you're a bit more satisfied with meals throughout the day. So I've got some protein serves here. Given that you're all sort of in the teenage years, 20 to 25 grams of protein servings per sort of meal is totally fine. I just wanted to highlight, if you do eat plant-based foods, you need to eat a large volume of the plant-based proteins to actually get the same amount of protein. So I'm not against any plant-based people, but I'm just really aware that often when people do go plant-based, they don't eat enough of the protein-based foods that are plant-based, of which then leads to under-recovery and feeling quite low in energy quite a lot. So you can have a selection of these foods. I think eggs is often one that people are surprised with. So many people just have 2 eggs or 1 egg. But actually 3 eggs is closer to 20 grams of protein. Or if you have like a whole grain bread, often 2 slices of bread gives you about 6 grams of protein and 2 eggs, and you're almost there. So some protein serves for you. We've got dairy and dairy alternatives. Obviously, dairy-free is becoming quite popular and common, whether you need to be dairy-free by choice or need to be dairy-free for like lactose intolerance or by choice, doesn't really matter. It is recommended to have 3 servings of dairy a day, and the purpose of this is to provide you with enough calcium to keep growing healthy bones and to be able to absorb vitamin D as well. So calcium is really important in that process. Dairy is a really important source of protein, as we saw on the last slide, fat and energy. And if you are consuming normal dairy or cow's milk, we would recommend yellow or green top because it actually has added calcium into it. So you'll be getting more bang for your buck. And it's really easy to add as part of a main meal, whether it's adding like feta into a salad, adding cheese over something, or having yogurt on the side of or on top of oats or something like that. If you are choosing dairy-free alternatives, please make sure they have been fortified with calcium. And you can check that by looking on the back of the label and seeing that calcium's on the nutrition information panel and that they actually have protein. So I have this here. You can see cow's milk usually has about 8 to 10 grams per cup of milk of protein. And then soy milk has sort of somewhere between 6 and 7 grams per cup. And the rest of them are really, really low. So if you are having almond milk, coconut milk, thinking that you might be getting some protein from that, you're not. And something just to make sure, I think there's only 2 brands now of plant-based milks that actually fortify with calcium. So if you're having these plant-based milks for calcium, I would highly recommend making sure you've got a fortified one because you really do need the calcium. What a serving of dairy actually looks like. So you could have 250 mils of a milky drink, whether that's soy-based, like your Up and Goes, or whether it is dairy-based, doesn't really matter, or like half a cup of yogurt or 2 slices of cheese. So if you picked one from each of these categories here, you would have your 3 servings of dairy across the day. And they get really easily mixed into like snacks and all those sorts of goodies as well. So really convenient sources of actually protein and calcium. We've got fruits and veg, my favorite category. The old saying used to be 5+ a day. And I don't know if I'm showing my age now, but it's actually now 5 servings of veg plus 2 fruits plus 2 servings of fruit a day. So it's actually 7+ a day now. Fruit and veg are really important for providing us with fiber, some carbs, which is our energy source, vitamins and minerals. And we recommend to eat sort of a variety of colors a day. So there's this cute wee phrase saying eat the rainbow. And the reason for that is every single color of fruit and veg has a different antioxidant profile, which basically it's a fancy term for things that will keep your body well and healthy. So if you have a bunch of different colors throughout the day, you're getting a wide variety of nutrients, which then just helps support your immune system and keeps you training, because if you're sick, you're going to have time out of training. And we know that obviously in our system and in the elite side of things, the more time people can train, the more likely they are to win medals or to win races. And I did want to say fresh or frozen are totally okay. For some reason, frozen veg have this really bad stigma. But from a nutrition point of view, frozen fruit, frozen veg are as healthy as the fresh counterpart. In terms of servings of fruit and veg, if you're going for fruit, so any sort of small fruit, so you've got your apricots, plums, kiwi fruit, 2 of those is 1 serving of fruit. And then like your banana, orange, and apple, 1 serving is just 1 piece of fruit. And similar with frozen veg or cooked veg, half a cup is 1 serve, and 1 cup of fresh veg is a serve. So basically, you're not going to be able to meet your 7+ a day unless you're having veggies in your lunch and fruit at breakfast and probably in a couple of snacks, and even potentially in a supper. So it is something that's often forgotten. And when I go through food diaries of the athletes, I'm often looking for actually, are you getting in fruit and veg? Because it is the thing that is just forgotten, and protein and carbs seems to take over. But I really do challenge you to try and keep getting fruits and veggies in whatever capacity you can get them in, because they are the thing that are going to help keep you well. And that is really what matters. Breads and cereals, this is what you'll probably know as carbs. The Ministry of Health recommends 7+ servings a day. As you are athletes or active people, 7 serves is probably the bare minimum. And it might sound like a lot, but in the next slide, I actually have what the serving sizes are, and it will make sense as to why that doesn't actually seem like much. Breads and cereals provide us with carbs, of which is the muscle and brain fuel source. So when you are out running, this is what your body is burning through, or when you're out on the boat, this is what your body's burning through to actually get you going. And it's also what your brain uses when you're learning at school or when you're out on the water listening to your coach talk. And it's also a really good source of fiber. One thing I did want to mention is for like day-to-day nutrition, there is the recommendation to sort of focus more on whole grain. So like brown rice, your oats, your multi-grain breads. And then we sort of have our performance carbs, which are more of the white ones. And you might have heard of them as referred to as the high GI foods. So that's more like white rice, white bread, your crumpets, your pancakes, like all those sorts of things that are a little bit less fibrous. And I will get to that in a little bit as well. So servings, you can probably see here already that these serving sizes are quite small. So I'm yet to meet an athlete that only has 2 Weet-Bix for breakfast. So if you have 4 Weet-Bix for breakfast and you have 2 sandwiches at lunch, you're already almost 6 servings of carbs done for the day. So you can see how actually for an athlete, 7 servings of carbs is probably not enough. So it's always really important to make sure that every time you have a main meal, there's some form of carbohydrate in there, because that is ultimately what keeps you going. It fuels your brain. And I was reading a stat not that long ago which said your brain alone, if you were to lie in bed, needs about 10 to 12 slices of bread equivalent of energy per day just to keep it functioning. Add on top of that, going through puberty, learning at school, being an athlete, you can see why teenagers typically do eat a larger volume of food, because there is the requirement there. So I just wanted to quickly touch on this. As you are active individuals and you're teenagers, I would probably say, I'm not sure if you can actually see my cursor, the moderate to hard training should probably be what your plates look like most of the time. You can, when you get further on down the track, look at tailoring how much of your plate is taken up with your grains versus vegetables and proteins and fats. This is sort of more advanced nutrition, but I just did want to show that there are levels. And we can play around with how much is on the plate according to what you're needing to achieve or according to your training load, because if the more you train, the more energy you need. That is just the bread and butter really of nutrition. So what about the weekend? Now I have a question for Greta here. But before I ask that, the weekend I think is forgotten about, because when I talk to athletes, Monday to Friday, they've got this routine. They're going to work, they're going to uni, they've got their training morning and afternoon. But then they get to the weekend, and if they don't have a regatta in the weekend is kind of just like free reign, which is fine. But then when you think about it, 2 days out of 7 days is about 30% of your week. And what I've experienced and seen with athletes is that it often gets to be a really busy time, because catching up with friends, other training, so going for long bike rides, maybe other sports, it might be other family commitments, and often the structure that you have Monday to Friday gets lost, and then nutritional choices maybe either you forget to eat, or the choices that you make in food maybe aren't as conducive towards health and performance, of which then can in some ways lead to Monday. You start Monday in sort of a suboptimal, not recovered from the week place. And I'm not saying don't have fun on your weekends, because that's what weekends are for, but it's just something to be really mindful of. So my question for Greta is, how do you keep on top of your fueling when it comes to the weekend?
Okay. I think, yeah, like Kelsey said, I think weekends are often something that we kind of overlook and don't really, I guess, plan. And if we are doing like a meal plan for the week, but as you guys are all athletes and we all probably do sport or some kind of exercise on the weekend, it is still super important to keep that up. So I guess something that I try and do is I always like focus on having a good breakfast. I think that's probably the most important bit of my weekend. I try and like get up, make a nice breakfast, and then go and do some exercise. And I think if I can start the day off right, I think that then sets me up to, like, I don't know, if I have a smaller lunch or something, at least I know that I've fueled myself correctly, like in the morning. But also, I like to have like quite a few snacks in my car. It's almost like a mini grocery store. So I have things like, I wrote down what I have in my car. I have like Up and Goes, like beef jerky, muesli bars, those little like Uncle Toby's like oats sachets, the ones you like put water in. I have those in my car. I think it's Uncle Toby's or Uncle Ben's. I can't remember.
I think
Anyway,
Uncle
I have
Toby.
like a lot of like pocket snacks. Yeah, I have a lot of pocket snacks just readily available in my car. So if I am out and about on the go, like all you kind of need is a microwave and some water, which is probably quite easy to find. And yeah, and then it just stops you from, I guess, like missing a meal or yeah, not having enough food and then having to go and buy something which isn't as great as what you probably could bring from home. I think that's something that's really important for sailors as well, because usually we're at a beach, like we're not in a, I don't know, a gym facility or a sports field or something like that. So yeah, having easy access meals, but also ones which are like highly nutritious is really helpful, what I find as well.
I love that. And I think a lot of athletes have a little mini grocery store in their cars, and that is probably what you need to do, because if you are on the go and you do have your own car, you'll find you spend a lot of time traveling, especially if you live in Auckland. So great suggestions. Thank you, Greta. So that does sort of tie into sort of some of the tips that I'd written down in terms of make sure you actually get your 3 main meals in. And then at least 2 to 3 snacks. You might even need more, but if you've got the snacks with you, then at least you're not going to be hungry, because being hungry is the worst. Another thing I'd probably say is plan ahead. If you kind of know what your weekend's entailing, kind of scope out places that you could go and eat if you did want to go buy stuff, or if you can prep in advance and take it with you. I know a lot of our sailors love going out surfing or fishing. So take some food with you when you go and do your activities that you like doing in the weekend, because that is going to help you actually enjoy that activity more if you're not hungry, but also then your recovery from the week just been, and the week ahead. Something that people may not actually realize is when you've done a workout or you've done a training session, the recovery of that takes about 48 hours per session. So if you've done all these trainings throughout the week and you get to the weekend and you're not training, you're still recovering from the trainings that you've done throughout the whole week collectively. So it is really important to make sure you're still giving your body the food and the fuel that it needs to recover. And my last tip there is actually to learn to cook. So you're in this really fun stage of life where you have the opportunity to potentially learn to cook at either at school or with your parents or whoever looks after you. And I would take that opportunity because if you do progress in sailing and you're overseas, there are times where you're going to have to cook for yourself and you're going to have to be really savvy with what you're cooking. So learn the tips while you can, learn how to make 5 or 6 core meals and just get comfortable in the kitchen, because then when you actually have to meal prep later on in life, you'll know what you're doing and it'll be less of a thing, and less of a stress for you. I did see there was a question in the chat about the fruit and whether dried fruit takes away from the nutrition. It does a little bit. It does so dried fruit is very high in sugar, which is one of the reasons why we actually do recommend it for during training fuel, which I'm about to get to. It can still count as a serving of fruit, but probably wouldn't be what I would recommend as the main source of fruit in your diet, mainly through like dental health and sugar content, though. So great for during fuel, like during sport training, during sailing, fueling, but probably not as your sole source of fruit, if that makes sense. Alrighty. So this kind of goes back to the title of the talk, is are you fueling enough for training? And it's a question I ask myself every time I speak to an athlete. It's basically, are they eating enough? And it can be quite hard to actually figure this out exactly. But energy availability essentially is the energy left over from the food that we eat after all the costs of exercise has been accounted for. So it's the fuel that you leave your body in order to run all the processes, all the systems. And what happens if we don't have enough energy left over from food after we've exercised? That's when the body starts to shut down processes. So usually the first thing to go is the menstrual cycle for women. And for men, if you wake up in the morning and you don't have your morning erection, that's a really, really bad sign. So your body does tend to show you signs that you're not eating enough. So things like recurrent injury, if you are consistently getting injured, it's probably a sign that something's not quite right, especially if there's stress fractures. If you're finding that you're sick all the time, I do understand when you're a teenager, you're around a lot of key people all the time, and there are a lot of illnesses at school. But if you are constantly sick, it's a red flag. If you're feeling fatigued, again, you're going through puberty, you've got a lot of stuff happening, but if it's more than normal, again, it's a sign that you're probably not fueling well enough. If you've got mood disturbances, if you've got decreased response to training, so what that basically means is if you're training a lot but you're not seeing any improvements, if you are in the gym, if you're not seeing any improvements in your strength, or if you're on the water and things just aren't progressing like they should. You might have decreased concentration at school or when you're outside of school trying to do anything that involves concentration, or if you're underperforming in training, much like I mentioned before. These are all signs that you're not quite nailing your fueling, and hopefully there might be some things we can take away from today that you can implement, or it might be a sign to actually go and speak to someone who does specialize in sports nutrition to actually check, am I eating enough? Because if you're experiencing any of these, there's a high possibility you're probably not. On a lighter topic, now we'll talk about fueling for training. In nutrition, small changes make a big difference. Now, what we've got here is a representation of what most Kiwis, I would say, probably eat in a day. And you can see it's very back of the day heavy. So really small breakfast, maybe a small snack after morning training if you have one, maybe a sandwich for lunch, maybe some fruit for afternoon tea, and then a massive dinner. If you're wanting to seek results, we sort of need to maximize with these meals and maybe add in a supper. So in terms of what I mean by small changes, for breakfast, let's add in some protein, let's add in some avocado for a little bit of fiber. And what this does is it slows down digestion. So it means that you actually feel fuller for longer, meaning that you will be able to concentrate, hopefully. You'll be able to grow. You won't be hungry within 30 minutes of eating your toast with Marmite. And this enables your body to also, yeah, basically just fuel for the work you're going to do, but also recover from the work you have done. Let's say you did a morning gym session and you had a muesli bar afterwards. Let's add in a milky drink, whether that's an up and go, whether it's a glass of milk, whether it's, I don't know, a Milo and a banana. Because adding those in there, we're adding in some protein, you've got some carbs, and you've got a little bit more fiber. Again, the combination of those three things are going to slow down digestion and make you feel fuller for longer, and then help with the recovery process, and hopefully get you through to lunch without you wanting to eat your arm off. We then have lunch. If you have one sandwich, let's make it two. Let's add in some mayonnaise. Let's add in some cheese, because the mayo is a really nice fat source, really easy energy, and that's going to help you feel full as well. And the cheese will just add another layer of protein in there. And then maybe a glass of juice or Milo just for an extra bit of energy in there, just to make sure that you're actually having some substantial energy input into your lunch. Because normally after lunch, you normally have an afternoon training, I'm imagining, of some description, or afternoon exercise. So let's add in some peanut butter or a sandwich or some up and go to afternoon tea before you start training, so that you can actually have the fuel on board to train. Dinner, that can stay the same. And then let's add in a supper. Because let's think about it, while you're sleeping, that's when you're doing all your recovery. That's when your body is repairing itself. That is when magic happens in your body, essentially. So it kind of makes sense to actually provide it with a little bit of extra fuel before you go to bed, to actually enable it to do all of those things well, and for you to wake up feeling refreshed. And I do recommend that to be more of a protein-based supper. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be a small smoothie. It could be a yogurt bowl with some berries and some muesli. It could be cheese and crackers, whatever you want it to be. But this will make you feel a whole lot more fueled for training and recovered for life, than what the first example of what we talked about would. So it leads in nicely to fueling for an early morning session. If you do have an early morning training session of any nature, it is quite common for people to struggle to eat first thing in the morning. So this is another way where do teenagers need to try and eat in a 12-hour window? What do you mean by that? Welcome to the question. So yeah, basically fueling for an early morning session. If you struggle to eat in the morning, that's where supper can be really helpful to give your body some fuel prior to that morning training session. It means you won't wake up so hungry and fatigued. And some other suggestions for that could be toast or muffin splits or bagels or crumpets. You could have some cereal, some leftover dinners, some toasted sandwiches, baked beans on toast. If you've got 2-minute noodles in the house, you could add some frozen veg and some leftover meat or something to make them sort of some bougie 2-minute noodles, or some baking. If you can eat in the morning, there we go. Then these are some things that we could maybe not, probably don't want to eat this sort of thing first thing in the morning, or leftover pasta. Some people do. But pre-training in the morning, basically trying to aim for something that's really high in carbs. So that could be an up and go, could be some creamed rice, could be a banana in an up and go, it could be peanut butter on toast, it could be anything beige, basically. And if you do struggle in the morning but you still want to eat, it's just starting off really small. So normally I do recommend people starting with just like a single piece of toast, or if toast is too hard, a banana, or um, even crackers. Sometimes people really struggle. It can be hard to teach yourself to eat first thing in the morning, but you can train your gut to do that. So if you do struggle with that, it would be something to just work on really slowly, and don't just try and demolish some overnight oats first attempt at eating before the gym in the morning, because that will be really hard to get down. But anyway, obviously carbohydrates are important. You're not really aiming for protein before you train. And we're just making sure that you've got enough energy on board. We probably don't want high fiber foods before you eat, but before you train, because they do sit in the tummy a bit longer. And if you're doing something of which is reasonably intensive, the fiber can make you feel a little bit sick, and in some cases can make people vomit or have a really upset stomach for the rest of the day. Greta, this is a question for you. What is your go-to pre-training snack
Um,
or meal?
so I think I usually train, I usually gym in the morning, and I'm not that great at eating a big breakfast before I gym. So usually I'll have an up and go and a banana on the way to the gym, and maybe a coffee as well. And then, yeah, probably after that is when I would have my main breakfast. So like a pre-training, yeah, I'd either have probably leftovers, which is it's usually pasta, just because I'm lazy and I just cook pesto pasta, or I have like a smoothie or something with peanut butter usually. So like a peanut butter sandwich and a smoothie, or leftovers, which is usually pasta.
Nice, good combination. And yeah, I think it's probably more common to be like you in terms of struggling to eat a big breakfast before training in the morning. So it is fairly common. But thank you for sharing. Now we've got in training nutrition. This one is something that sailors are kind of funny about, and I think it's because you're on the water, you've got your life jacket, your wetsuit, you've got wires, you've got the boat, and there's just a lot going on, and wet hands and all that jazz. But it is so important to eat while you're training. On average, you need about 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour of training. So just having one OSM for a 2 or 3 hour training session is not enough. And just some ideas of some foods that you can eat are on the screen here. Obviously, if we do first glance at this, they're all very high sugar foods, high carb foods. I do want to say in training, food is performance food, not health food. And I think often that can scare people off a little bit. But the foods that we need to eat while we're in training they need to provide us with quick sources of energy. They need to be easily digested. They need to have low fiber and low fat and relatively low protein in order to be digested and sit comfortably in the stomach. So these sorts of things are the things that we do need to eat on the water. Dried fruit does come in well here. I just haven't added it in. You also need to be having fluids and electrolytes on board. Electrolytes mainly if it's a really hot day and you sweat a lot, or if you've got a regatta and you're out there for 5 or 6 hours in the sun, I would highly recommend having some. Whether you make your own or you buy some like the Vitasport, you can easily make your own by just getting like the Raro packets and putting, I think it's a tablespoon per like 750 mils water and some pinch of salt. So you've got some salt, you've got some carbs, and you've got some water. Probably the cheapest electrolytes you'll ever make. And then yeah, that will help in that aspect. Greta, what do we find hidden in your life jacket for snacks while you're on the water?
I think that pictures a pretty good description of what you'd find. Definitely one square meals, like everyone said in the comment, they are like the best muesli bars to have. Probably a packet of snakes,
Nice.
and then probably a gel or something similar. And then in my water, I'll try to have electrolytes, which also has a little bit of carbs in it as well. Just so, yeah, I'm not having to eat like a huge sandwich or pasta on the water. But if I do have something like with bread, it's usually like, I don't know, one of those like finger bun things, or when we were at the Olympics, we would have chocolate croissants. It just, whatever it was. Yeah, it's something small, not like super heavy.
Yeah, perfect. So please take food out on the water with you while you're training. I think it is such a missed opportunity if you're not fueling while you're on the water. And it's, if you think about it, often, I'm not sure what time everyone launches, but if you're launching at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're missing lunch. So you really do need to be fueling while you're out there. Otherwise, you're essentially missing lunch and then exercising for 2 hours and then coming in. And most people I know would be starving by 3:30 if they were launching at that time. What type of dried fruit would I recommend? Honestly, anything. I know dried dates are really popular, or mango is a really popular one. It would just depend on what you like, and what you can tolerate. Some people find dates too fibrous. Some people find mango too fibrous. So it would be trial and error, see what works for you. Yeah. How much water and fluid would you think is the minimum to have when on the water? Great question. I am touching on hydration in a bit, so I will come back to that one.
Kelsey, Maria just had a question about, there's a lot of talk about eating 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 12 hours. Does that apply to teenage sailors?
Ah, I've not heard that. I think honestly, whatever time frame you can eat in, you need to eat in that. So if it is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., fine, but there's no definitive thing saying you can't eat after 7 p.m. if that's what you're asking. Basically, if you're a busy person and you can't get in enough food before 7 p.m., please eat after 7 p.m. because you're a growing human, and you need to be eating enough to fuel everything. Yeah, and I think no matter what, it doesn't matter what time you actually eat in the evening. I've heard so many stories, or so many people online saying if you eat after 8 p.m. you doesn't get, it basically gets, it's a lie, so don't listen to this. If you eat after 8 p.m. it gets stored as fat. That is very incorrect. There is no time of which you eat after that happens unless you're eating at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then your body's not actually set up to process fuel in that time. So no, there's no 12-hour 7 to 7 window that you have to eat in as a teenager. I hope that answers that question. Is there any more, Jenny?
I think there's a few on hydration, but maybe
we're getting to that.
You might answer them in your talk anyway, so we'll see.
Perfect. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about recovery now. So we do have the 4 R's of recovery. So replenish with carbohydrates within about 30 minutes. Repair with things like protein. So we've got our chalky milk, our up and go, sandwiches that have things like sliced ham in them. Rehydrate with electrolytes and fluids, and then revitalize. So like providing yourself with all the vitamins and minerals that you need to actually recover. So I think I actually have a question for Greta. Greta, what is your go-to recovery meal?
I think some kind of smoothie, whether it's like some milky drink, like I love chocolate milk, and usually a banana with it as well. And then I'll either have a sandwich or some kind of usually it's leftovers. I think, yeah, leftovers are your best friend. So I think that's another thing that's really important. If you are cooking dinner or making food, just make extra, so then you don't have to think about lunch for the next day. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I learned is, just make that tiny little bit extra, and then you'll be so thankful for the next day. And you can just have that after your training.
Love that. Chocolate milk is a big winner when it comes to recovery foods. I think from all the years I've been doing nutrition, the one main thing people take away from this talk is that they can have chocolate milk.
Does it work for banana milk or strawberry? Is it the
same? It's the same as all the flavors of like flavored milk. Just chocolate milk seems to be the most popular.
Yeah, it's mine too.
Yeah. Great question. So we'll talk about repair first. So we've kind of touched on this with all of the protein talk, but when you're training, muscles are stimulated to form. So the muscles are stimulated to increase muscle protein synthesis. Now, what this is, it's the process of your muscles actually repairing, recovering, and growing. So that you've got increased muscle protein synthesis for 24 hours after a workout or a training. So what we need to do is actually try and spread protein out over those meals and snacks to prioritize and to get the most out of food that we can to actually get the most recovery. Now that's when it goes back to the slide where I made all the changes to the diet or to someone's day. We increased the protein quite significantly just with those small tweaks. And what we did was actually this in terms of allowing you to have more time to recover with muscle protein synthesis so you can actually feel fresher when you wake up the next day. There is a little bit of research out there where they tested a pre-bed protein food. So I think they gave them some yogurt. And I think in the study it did actually have protein powder in it, but you can still just do it with yogurt or a milky drink. So those who have a pre-bed protein snack actually had an increase in muscle growth and recovery of 30% versus those who didn't. So that is huge. And that was done in rugby players, so not entirely translating to sailing, but 30% improvement in muscle recovery and strength and protein synthesis just from having a pre-bed protein snack. To me, it makes it kind of a no-brainer, and it's such a missed opportunity if that pre-bed snack is not actually had, especially if you're an active person. Again, here's your protein serves, just as a reminder. Then we got rehydration. So I know there was a few questions on hydration. So I was trying to think of an analogy to talk about hydration. And the one way I can think about it is if we've got a nice juicy steak and then we've got some biltong or some beef jerky. Our nice juicy steak is a well-hydrated muscle. So if you try and do any explosive movement through the boat with a well-hydrated muscle, it's going to stretch and compress. That's probably not the right words. But anyway, it's going to move very freely and enable you to do those movements very well. If you've got your biltong or your beef jerky and you're trying to suddenly move your muscle and get it to contract, it's not going to do a very good job, and it's probably going to get damaged if you try to even just move it. What I'm trying to reference here is this juicy steak is a well-hydrated muscle. Our biltong is a dehydrated muscle. So if you're dehydrated, you're increasing your risk of injury. You're going to make your life a lot harder. Things will feel harder. So this is why it's important to actually start a session hydrated, because you want to try and limit your risk of getting injured, but also just make your life easier than it needs to be. So if we've got the scale on the right-hand side here, you kind of want to make sure that your urine color is around sort of like a 2 to 3. If you're getting into the 5, 6, and 7s, that is a clue to like drink some water. There is a delay between you drinking water and your urine color changing. So don't expect it if you scull back 750 mils of water because you're really dehydrated. Don't expect that next pee to be a true representation of your hydration status. In order for you to actually absorb fluid, you need to have fluid with electrolytes / salt and some carbs. So if you, in the middle of the day, just go and drink 750 mils of water, that's just an example, and you haven't had any food and there's no electrolytes in your water, chances are you're probably just going to pee a lot of it out and still feel quite thirsty or dehydrated. So I often recommend to drink with your meals, drink water with your meals, because in food, you naturally have carbs, you naturally have electrolytes and salt. So that's just going to help you actually lock in the fluid into your cells so you can be hydrated, as opposed to just peeing it straight out. Obviously, if you are on the boat, like I talked about before, you can make BYI your own electrolyte drink with some Raro and some salt and some water. You could buy some Vitasport from the supermarket. There are many different ways you can DIY an electrolyte drink. You could get some Powerade and put a little bit of salt in it, or any of those sorts of things. As a rough guide in terms of how much to drink, it's really down to individual losses. Some people are really heavy sweaters. Some people don't sweat at all. So the average rough guide is drinking about 1.5 liters per day plus anything that's lost in training. So I'm not expecting everyone to weigh themselves and figure out how much they lose, but a really good indicator is checking what your pee is like before you start training and then what it's like at the end. If you find that you start training at a 2 and you end it at a 6, you probably didn't drink enough during that training. And your thirst cues are really, really important here. If you're listening to your thirst cues, you should be able to sort of stay on track with it. If you're out for a few hours, I would probably say take 1 to 2 drink bottles with you if it's a really hot day. One with water and one with electrolytes in it. A water bottle being 750 mils. Like, I know some people have massive, like 1.5 to like 1 liter, 1.5 liters. I know Greta has a massive drink bottle that she likes to cart around. But yeah, if you were ever interested, or if you are a heavy sweater, I would recommend potentially looking into sort of, if it was a really hot day, and if you were comfortable with this, seeing your body mass before training and then after training. And the difference, it's not weight loss, I promise, it's just fluid. So then that just shows you how much you've lost, how much fluid you've sweated out during that session. Obviously, you need to take into account how much you actually drank in that session as well. But that's sort of getting into the nitty-gritty side of things. But basically, if you take water bottles out, listen to your thirst cues. Sometimes hunger cues can be thirst cues. It's a little bit confusing. The brain likes to tie those two across. But if you're drinking while you're on the water, that's a really great start. And then once you get into the routine of drinking while you're on the water, then it might be refining it to make sure that when you come off the water, you're in not a terrible state. So it could be all right if you come off the water and you're like at a 4 rather than a 6. But yeah, imprint this urine chart in your mind because it's really helpful for just self-checking where you're at hydration-wise. Pre-race nutrition. Obviously, racing has its own sort of, everyone's race day is going to be different. I know there's some people that there's certain meals they need to eat on a particular time frame before their race. Some people are really superstitious with what they eat on race day. But we do need to take into account some things when it comes to racing. If you have 4 hours before the start, between waking up and the start of the race, great. I know in some cases that doesn't happen. So let's just say you've got 3 to 4 hours before training or before the race. You need to be having a really high carb meal. So that could be an open sandwich with some chicken and some lettuce and tomato. It could be some whole grain toast with some eggs. Could be some porridge with milk, yogurt, and berries. Whatever it is, you need to trial that before you even get to your race day and make sure that it sits all right in your stomach. Then if we get 2 to 3 hours before the race start, we want to try and have like a high carb, lower fat, sort of okay protein containing food. I do have examples in the next slides. And then an hour before your race starts, this is just when you need like those little top ups. So that could be a muesli bar, it could be a jam sandwich, it could be something that's really, really easy to digest. And it's just kind of a top up to make sure that you're not starting hungry. So Greta, before I get into the next slide, hang on, let me check my question. What is your biggest learning around racing nutrition?
I think my biggest lesson is probably you use a lot more energy than you think you do. I think when I first started, I underestimated how much you actually needed to consume, and going from someone who didn't consume enough to now consuming like the right amount, if not too much, just shows like the difference in performance, I guess, and like how much it made a difference to, I guess, how I feel on the water, and not only how I feel like before the racing, but also after, like being able to come off the water and still feeling good and like you're able to go for another day, I think is super valuable. But it's kind of the saying, like you reap what you sow. If you put like energy and effort into your nutrition pre-race, like you're gonna reap the reward after, and you're gonna feel a lot better than you would if you didn't. So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then obviously turning up to sailing or training correctly fueled and hydrated, I think is really important. Otherwise it's just like a domino effect, and if you turn up underfueled, underhydrated, it just going sailing is not going to make it better, it's going to make it actually worse. So coming prepared, I think, is probably another thing as well. Yeah.
Great reflection. I love that. Thank you. Okay, so here is an example of what some options could be. We are sending the slides out after this, so don't feel like you frantically have to write down notes if you are taking notes. But so an example of a pre-fueling meal, 3 hours, let's just say it's not actually meant to be pre-training, pre-race, would be, let's just say pancakes with some maple syrup, some yogurt, some berries, and if you drink coffee or a hot chocolate, some kind of milky drink. So that will give you a good amount of carbs. And then we go for our top up, which would be about an hour before. Could be some toast with peanut butter and banana. It could be some muesli and some berries. Could be a smoothie and an OSM. And then during, this is where we get some more during snacks. We fruit pouch or some mango spears. Here it's probably helpful to know how much carbs are in things. Muesli bars, there's so many options, but they're all really easily digestible, and it is really important to sort of aim for that 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour that you're out on the water. Whether you're racing for that full hour or not, I think it's still really important to get that in. And then our recovery foods. So the 4-hour window after you finish racing is really important for getting in protein and carbs and fluid replenishment. So that's where things like your smoothie, and chocolate milk can be really good because that provides protein, electrolytes, fruits, which provide you with your vitamins and minerals, and it provides you with a bit of carbs as well. So they are really the optimal recovery drink. So I would normally recommend within 30 to 45 minutes. I know with sailing, sometimes getting back to shore could take that long. So it can be really helpful to actually have something like that on the coach boat if you have one, or having them once you get to shore, and then within an hour and a half having a full proper meal. So basically by the time you get to shore, have something quick and easy, whether that's your up and go chocolate milk situation, and then an hour and a half later should give you enough time to pack down, debrief, and go somewhere to get some food or have some food with you to have during a debrief with the coach if you have one. So the next slide is just what it would look like if you were a male and you weighed a little bit more, because it's a little bit more carb heavy. So basically you need to eat more if you're a male than you do if you're a female. Yeah, some examples here for you all. So I did want to touch on supplements because they run rampant in sport in general. We do not recommend them if you're under 18. They are unregulated and there's high risk of cross-contamination. In 2017, there was a research that was done on New Zealand supplements, and they took a bunch of, I think it was about 100 supplements off the shelf and tested them, and over 54% of them came back testing positive for steroids that would have, if you were a TAPS or if you were a carded athlete, you would then potentially have a positive drug test. So it just really does show supplements do come with risk. Food actually provides you with everything that you need. And I think we really do need to harness in sort of like the strength that food can provide. So it just goes back to, let's sort out baseline nutrition. It's a bit like a cupcake. The baseline nutrition is the actual cupcake. Then we've got our icing, that's our fueling, timing, snacks. And then we've got our supplements. They're just like the sprinkles on top. It's like the final finishing touch, really. However, if eventually you do choose to use supplements, please look for some that are Informed Sport tested, or HACCP approved. This just shows they've been tested by an independent third party for all of the wider banned substances. And it really does, there's no 100% tick of approval saying you're safe, but it's the safest option as an athlete. And I did have a question for Greta here is, when did you start taking supplements and why?
Okay, so I kind of only really started taking supplements the start of this year, and I kind of treated it as like, yeah, the sprinkles, like just the extra tiny little touches. But before adding any of that into my diet, I really focused on trying to get the stuff which you try to find in supplements and do it with food instead. So I really tried to, if I needed protein or carbs, I would do it with like those foods first and like get a good balanced diet before adding in extra stuff. I think, yeah, it's really easy to just be like, I need this, I need this, and I need this. But actually, just like for me, I found it actually quite a hard experience to get it right the first time. I think it's not a thing that's like one size fits all. Just because your friend over there is taking, I don't know, protein powder doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. I know that like everybody's different. Some things might not work for you and they might work for other people. So I think if you are considering doing starting to add supplements, I think figure out your baseline nutrition first and doing everything with food. And then if you are trying to explore and get those extra little bits, then probably go see someone like Kelsey or a professional to figure out like what's going to be best for you. Because I know, yeah, for me, we had to do a lot of experimenting with like different brands and different types and like whey protein or like plant protein, that just an example. So it's not a one size fits all and you're not going to get it right the first time. So yeah, just be patient. There's no rush to start it. Like food is all you need, I think, at the moment. Yeah.
And food just tastes so much better. I'm
Yeah.
yet to find a protein powder that actually tastes good. I saw someone had a question and I can't find it. Hang on a minute.
Is that the
Question.
question about creatine?
Yeah, yes.
Or
There was
what do you
also,
think?
are electrolytes better to drink than water for on water hydration? I'll answer that one first. Um, I think it comes down to preference, to be honest. If you're having food while you're on water, then water itself should be okay because you'll be getting some electrolytes through the food you're eating as well as some carbs. However, if it is really hot, electrolytes probably would be a little bit more superior than water to drink while you're on the water, just because you'll be losing electrolytes and sweat faster than you could probably replenish them. Hopefully that makes sense. And then what do I think about creatine? Great question, Toby. Creatine has some great benefits, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve by using it. We've used it for a lot of people to help them get stronger, as that is one of creatine's sole purposes, to be honest. It can also be used sort of for around that with the weight manipulation piece, which is very common in sailing. It's something which, if you're under 18, I would not recommend to use at all. It's not appropriate for that situation. And then another one, yeah, it just depends on what you're wanting to get out of it, to be honest, because it is a safe, as long as it's an informed sports approved or HASTA approved supplement, it is well researched and reasonably safe to take. Just depends on what you're trying to achieve. Cool. So, some key takeaways. Eat before you train, needs to be high in carbs. Eat during training, make sure you're filling up your life jacket with some snacks, whether that's muesli bars, jet planes, bananas. I've just heard that you've got to be really careful with how you place your banana. Thanks, Jenny. Some jet planes. Eating straight after training. If you've been out on the water for 2 hours, chances are you've probably not eaten for about 3 hours. So by then you should be hungry. So make sure you're actually prepared with a snack. And sort of when you do come off the water, whatever you do eat in that time does need to have some carbs and protein in it just to help with that recovery process. And then eat something more decent when you get home. Plan ahead. You're probably going to hear this a lot, but you're in a sport where you can't afford not to plan. And then learn to cook while you can, because that is going to be so helpful for when you do leave home or when you do go offshore for competitions, because yeah, learning to cook really is such an essential piece of life, whether you're an athlete or not. That is me. Any questions that I've not already answered?
Cool. Oh, silence. Cool. Well, hey, if you've got any questions, drop them in. But I just thought I'd first of all thank you, Kelsey and Greta, for helping us out with this presentation. And a couple of things I was thinking while you're well, was my dinner tonight was not very rainbow like, so I might try and improve that for tomorrow. So that's something that will stick with me. And snacks in the car, Greta, awesome. I think that's a really good takeaway. And I was really pleased to see that the OSMs, which a lot of our sailors had as their go-to snack, is actually something you mentioned many times. So that's really good to see that a lot of us are on the right track already. Um, so I hope everyone did learn something tonight, and I hope you can put it into practice so you can perform, increase your performance and perform at your best, and then back up and do it the next day at and continue to do that. If you think at the end of this, oh, I should have asked this, please, I will send out an email tomorrow with the slides and my contact details. And then if you've got any questions or need more information, just flick it through to me and I'll pass to Kelsey to get the information out of her so she can help us all sail better and faster and smarter around the course. So thank you again, Kelsey. And the next webinar we'll have will be next year, and it will be in February on performance under pressure. So stand by for that one. We'll send out information for that. But thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you next time.